Montana Territory, 1884. The first snowfall came early that year, dusting the hills outside of Red Willow like powdered sugar on a cold grave. Jovie Ellard stood outside the mercantile, her shawl pulled tight over her shoulders, watching the townsfolk pretend not to see her. They glanced, then turned away. Mrs. Holcomb whispered something to her daughter as they passed. Jovie caught the words, "useless now," before the wind carried the rest down Main Street. She had heard worse. The sickness had come the previous winter. Fever burned through her lungs for weeks. When it finally let go, she was not the same. Her breath never came easy now, and she tired fast. Her hands shook when she tried to carry anything heavier than a kettle. Folks said she was lucky to survive, but they did not mean it like a blessing. They meant it like a burden. She had once worked the Ellard homestead alone after her father passed planting, hauling, mending fences, raising chickens. After the illness, she had to hire help just to keep the place from falling apart. Then the money ran out. Then the help left. Then people started saying she should sell and move back east. But there was no one east. Her mother died when she was a girl. Her father had brought her west to start over. This land was the only thing she had ever truly belonged to. That morning, she had come into town to trade eggs and wool for flour. She had only 6 eggs to her name, and the wool was from last spring. Much of it was matted. She stepped into the mercantile. Mr. Carther barely looked up. "Just eggs today," he said. "And wool," she said, laying the bundle on the counter. "I was hoping to get a sack of flour." He ran his hand over the wool, frowned. "This is not worth much, Jovie." "It is clean," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And the eggs are fresh." He shook his head. "I will give you a half sack. No more." She nodded once. Pride was something she had learned to swallow in small pieces. Outside, clouds dragged low over the hills. She started toward her wagon, her breath short after only a few steps. She stopped, set the sack down, and leaned against the wheel. "Need a hand?" a voice asked. She turned. A man stood a few paces off, tall, lean, his hat pulled low. His coat was worn but clean, his boots dusted with trail dirt. He looked like he had ridden hard to get here. "I am fine," she said. He did not move. "That sack looks heavy." "I said I am fine." He nodded once, then stepped forward anyway, and picked it up. "Name is Xalen Price. I am looking for work. Folks say you have land." She blinked. "Who told you that?" "Old man with a limp in the saloon. Said the Ellard place used to be something." "It still is," she said sharply. "Well, if you need help, I drive cattle, fix fences, hunt, haul. I do not drink. And I am not scared of hard work." Jovie stared at him. "I cannot pay much." "Then do not pay much," he said. "Just give me a dry place to sleep and something warm to eat." She hesitated. No one had offered help without asking something in return, not since she got sick. Not since she became useless. "Why?" she asked. He looked her right in the eye. "Because you are still here. That means something." For a second, she could not speak. Then she nodded toward the wagon. "Climb in. We will talk on the way." They drove back to the homestead in silence most of the way. Her hands stayed tight on the reins. He sat beside her, quiet, watching the land roll by. The Ellard place was 5 miles out. The barn leaned a little too far to the west. The coop needed mending. The roof was missing 3 shingles. But the fields lay wide in gold in the fading light. Xalen unloaded the sack without being asked. He looked around, then turned to her. "This land still has life," he said. She crossed her arms. "You talk like a man who has known death. I have seen enough of it to know the difference." Jovie did not ask more. That night, she made stew with the last of her carrots. He ate slow, like he had learned to savor things. Afterward, he offered to sleep in the barn. "No need," she said. "You can take the cot by the stove." He nodded, but did not thank her. In the morning, he fixed the chicken wire without being told. Then he chopped wood until his shirt stuck to his back. He did not talk much, but he worked like he meant to stay. By the end of the week, the barn stood straight again. She caught herself watching him once how his shoulders moved under the weight of a beam, steady and sure. She looked away fast, cheeks warm. On the 8th day, he found her behind the house, coughing hard enough to double over. "You all right?" he asked, coming close. She hated how weak she looked. "It just takes me sometimes." He handed her a cup of water. She took it, breathing slow. "You do not have to stay," she said. "I know I am not much use." He shook his head. "They called you useless after your sickness," he said quietly. But you already survived more than most ever do. Her throat tightened. She looked down, not trusting herself to speak. You do not need to prove anything, he added. Not to me. That night, after supper, he lit the fire and sat across from her. The room was warm, quiet. She looked at him through the flickering light. You ever been married? She asked. He shook his head. No. Had a girl once, years back. But the trail kept pulling me. By the time I came back, she was gone. I had no one, Jovie said. Just the land. He studied her for a long moment. You are not alone now. Outside, snow fell soft against the window. She did not say anything. But her heart steadied, like a fence post newly sunk in solid ground. The third week brought wind that whispered through the chinks in the cabin walls, but the fire stayed lit, and the chores got done. Xalen had started sleeping later, though only by a little, just enough to let Jovie finish her morning tea without feeling watched. She noticed the way he moved through the yard now, more like someone who belonged than someone passing through. One morning, while he hammered new planks onto the back porch, she brought him a tin mug of chicory brew. He took it without a word, but she saw the corner of his mouth lift, just slightly. I've been thinking, she said, sweeping sawdust off the step with her boot, about the west field. I could run sheep there again, if I get the fencing fixed. He nodded, then set the hammer down and wiped his hands on his trousers. The fence'll hold another season if we shore up the far posts. Ground there's softer than it should be, though. Might need drainage. You know sheep? She asked, surprised. My uncle kept them in Wyoming territory. I herded for him 2 winters before I left. She leaned against the post, watching the sunlight catch in the grain of the new wood. Why'd you leave? He took a long sip before answering. He died. Fever took him fast. I stayed through the spring, sold what we had, then drifted. Never quite found a place that felt right to stop. She tilted her head. What made you stop here? He looked at her, then not quick or shy, but like he was weighing the truth of it. You did. That quieted her more than she expected. She looked away, out toward the hills where the snow had melted in long streaks across the grass. A hawk circled above the tree-line, slow and steady. I don't know what to do with that, she said finally. You don't have to do anything with it, he replied. Just let it be. By the end of that week, they had the fence patched and a new gate cut from cedar. Jovie found herself humming again while she worked, which startled her. It had been over a year since music came natural. She started baking in the evenings small things, cornbread and simple pies from the last of the dried apples. One night, she caught him watching her knead dough, eyes soft. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. The next day, she rode into town alone, needing salt and lamp oil. When she stepped into the mercantile, Mrs. Holcomb was there again, fingering bolts of muslin. She glanced up, then frowned. Heard you took on a stranger, the woman said. Jovie didn't flinch. His name is Xalen Price. He's done more for that land in 3 weeks than anyone else has in 3 seasons. Mrs. Holcomb sniffed. Don't say I didn't warn you. Drifters don't settle. They take what they want and vanish. Jovie didn't answer. She paid for her goods and left. That evening, she told him about it while they shelled beans by the fire. She didn't mean to, it just came out. Folks think you'll leave, she said, voice low. They say you're only here for what you can get. He didn't look up. You believe that? I don't know what to believe, she said. But I know what I've seen. He nodded, slow. People see what fits the story they already told themselves. Doesn't make it true. She studied his hands, strong and steady even in the lamplight. You planning to stay? He looked up then, and the room felt still. If you want me to. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for another handful of beans. Her fingers brushed his. He didn't pull away. I'm not asking you to fix everything, she said, voice barely louder than the ticking of the stove. I don't want to be alone in this anymore. You won't be, he said. After that night, something shifted. She stopped waiting for him to leave. He started carving a new yoke for the oxen, even though they didn't have any yet. They planned the spring planting together. He suggested barley. She wanted onions. They agreed on both. One morning, it rained steady, and the 2 of them stayed inside. She read aloud from one of her father's old books, her voice rough, but even. He listened with his eyes closed, chair tipped back on 2 legs. When she finished the chapter, he spoke without opening his eyes. You ever think about what comes after all this? She set the book down, careful. After what? After the land's mended. After the fences hold. After you can breathe easy again. She watched the rain bead on the window pane. I used to think there wasn't anything after. Just more work, more days. And now, she turned toward him. Now I think maybe there's more, if we make it. He opened his eyes. Then let's make it. Outside, the rain softened to a hush. Inside, the fire burned low, warm and steady. The first lamb was born just after dawn, slick and shivering in the half-light, its bleat thin but determined. Jovie crouched low, skirts damp with dew, hands steady as she cleared the little creature's nose. Xalen stood just behind her, holding the lantern high, his breath rising in faint clouds. She's strong, Jovie said, brushing damp wool from the lamb's chest. Didn't expect her to come so soon. She wanted to be early, he replied. Maybe she sensed the weather turning. They walked back to the cabin with the ewe and her lamb pinned safe behind them, the trail soft beneath their boots. Inside, the fire hadn't yet caught fully, and Jovie knelt to coax it with kindling and a breath through her teeth. Xalen poured water into the kettle and set it over the coals without needing to be asked. I've been thinking about the north slope, he said after a moment, leaning his hip against the table. If we clear the brush, it'd take a second pasture. Jovie wiped her hands on a towel and stood slowly. We'll need to wait until the ground softens. Frost's still there under the top layer. He nodded. I figured. Just planning ahead. She studied him a moment, then reached into the cupboard for the tin of coffee she'd set aside the week before. You always think that far forward? He shrugged once. Used to think only a day at a time. Then I started wanting to know what next month looked like. And after that, she spooned the grounds into the pot and poured the boiling water over top. The scent rose with the steam, sharp and grounding. There's a schoolhouse starting up near the creek, she said. 3 miles down. They're looking for someone to help with the building. Pays not much, but it's honest. I can ride out, he said. See what they need. She passed him a mug. You'd be good at teaching boys how to square a beam. I was a boy once. Broke more than I built. She smiled into her own cup. That's how they learn. The day passed between tasks, each of them moving in rhythm without needing to speak much. She mended harnesses while he sharpened the draw knife. In the afternoon, he rode out to the creek while she picked through the last of the stored potatoes, setting aside the ones that had gone soft. He returned by dusk, coat damp with mist, eyes steady. They'll need help with the roof beams come Sunday, he said, hanging his hat by the door. I told them I'd come. She nodded, brushing her palms on her apron. Good. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he looked at her with a quiet weight behind his gaze. They asked if I had a place I was staying. I said yes, that I was settled. Jovie's fingers stilled on the table's edge. You are. His voice didn't rise, didn't falter. I meant it. She stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on the back of the chair. I know. The fire popped softly. Outside, the wind had gone still. I've never asked for much, she said. And I don't ask now. But if you want to stay for good, I'd like that. He reached for her hand, calloused fingers warm against hers. Then I'll stay. She let out a breath she hadn't known she'd been holding. It wasn't relief, exactly. It was something steadier, like soil after rain. Later that night, they stood on the porch, the air cool with early spring. Stars hung low over the hills, and the moon traced silver along the ridge. You ever think about what comes after all this? She asked. He didn't answer right away, just slipped his hand into hers. If it's with you, I don't much care what shape it takes. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they stood that way until the lantern burned low behind them, and the world felt wide and quiet and full. The land turned wet in April. Mud clung to wagon wheels and boot soles, and the lambs, now a dozen strong, tested their legs in the soft pasture beyond the east fence. Jovie stood in the doorway one morning, watching them leap and stumble like they'd been promised the whole world and didn't yet know better. Behind her, Xalen was oiling the hinges on the front room's window shutter. The faint scent of boiled linseed drifted through the cabin. His sleeves were rolled, and the quiet rhythm of the cloth against the iron was the only sound between them. She turned. I've got a letter to send. I'll need to ride into town. He nodded without looking up. I'll hitch the mule. I can manage it. I know. He set the oil tin down and met her eyes. But it's a long ride. I'd rather be with you. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. They were past that now. The letter was for the county register papers to confirm the property now listed Jovie as sole owner. Her father's name had never been formally removed, and after her illness, there'd been talk that the land might revert to auction if she didn't file proper claim. She hadn't had the strength or the money before. Now she had both. As they rode, the road curved through thawing fields and spring-fed creeks that ran high with meltwater. The trees wore new color, pale green and unsteady. Xalen rode just behind her, letting her set the pace. When they reached Red Willow, the town was louder than usual, wagon teams jostling near the feed store, a preacher calling out from atop a crate near the church steps, two boys racing past the saloon with fishhooks in their fists. She tied off the mule outside the post station, stepping down with care. Xalen stayed close, but didn't hover. Inside, the clerk behind the counter adjusted his spectacles and took the envelope from her without comment. Jovie glanced around. Two men were arguing over the price of tobacco, and someone was sweeping near the stove, but no one paid her any special mind. That was new. Back outside, she turned to Xalen. You want to stop at the smithy? You mentioned needing new chain for the gate pulley. He nodded. Could use a length of hemp rope too. While he went down the street, she crossed into the dry goods shop. The bell above the door gave a tired jingle. Behind the counter, Mr. Carter looked up. Miss Ellard, you're back early in the season. I've got more mouths to feed, she said, setting a list on the counter. And I'll need salt blocks, if you've still got them. He scanned the list, then reached for his ledger. I'll give you fair trade on the wool when your next shearing's ready. Her brow lifted. You didn't offer that last year. You didn't have a full flock last year, he said, without looking up. Seems like things changed. She didn't answer, just folded her arms and waited while he tallied the goods. When she stepped out again, Xalen was already waiting with the rope coiled over one shoulder and a small sack in his hand. Got what you needed? She asked. He nodded, then held out the sack. For you. She opened it. Inside was a jar of dried lavender and a spool of blue thread. I saw you looking at it last time we were here, he said. She closed the sack carefully. I didn't have enough to trade for it. I did. They didn't speak again until they were halfway home, the mule stepping slow through a low rise where water pooled across the road. The smell of damp earth and cottonwood hung in the air. Jovie turned in the saddle. I've been thinking of digging a well closer to the barn. The creek's a ways off for the ewes. He nodded, guiding his horse around a stump. I can start marking it tomorrow. I'll help. He glanced at her, then forward again. You ever think about having more? More what? Animals, crops, people. She let the reins rest loose in her hands. I've thought about what it'd be like. Having someone to pass the land to. Someone who knows it like I do. He was quiet for a moment. I'd like that too. She didn't answer, but her chest felt tight, not with worry, like before, but with something gentler. Something growing. Back at the homestead, the sky had gone gold behind the ridge, and the lambs were huddled near the fence line. Xalen unhitched the mule while she carried the rope toward the barn. He caught up with her as she opened the door. You still think I'll leave? He asked, voice low. No, she said, not turning. I think you already stayed. That night, after supper, she took the spool of thread and stitched a new patch onto the curtain above the wash basin. The blue caught the firelight, soft and steady. He sat nearby, carving a peg for the tool rack, knife moving in slow arcs. They didn't speak, but the quiet between them didn't need filling. Outside, the wind picked up again, brushing against the windows like an old friend returning. Inside, the room held warm. By late May, the earth had warmed enough for planting. Jovie knelt beside the garden plot behind the cabin, pressing onion sets into the dirt with calloused fingers. Her sleeves were rolled, and her braid was tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat that once belonged to her father. Beside her, Xalen worked the soil with a short-handled hoe, his shirt damp from the work, the muscles in his forearms shifting with each pull. You ever think about building more rooms onto the house? She asked, not looking up. He rested the hoe against his thigh. What for? She smoothed the soil over a row. I was thinking about space. If we had someone else here, we'd need it. He looked at her then, not startled, just quiet. I'm not saying now, she added, still focused on the dirt. Just, I've been wondering if we might start thinking ahead. His voice was steady. I think about it every morning I wake up beside you. She nodded once, then stood to stretch her back. We'd need another bed frame. And more linens. I can carve the frame, he said. You'd want the linens just so. She smiled faintly. I would. They worked until the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the field. After supper, Jovie folded a worn map over the kitchen table, weighing it down at the corners with stones. There's a surveyor coming through, she said, tracing a line with her finger. He'll pass east of here, down past the ridge. I thought we might offer him lodging. He can confirm our boundaries while he's here. Xalen leaned over the map, scanning the marks. You want everything written down. I want it clear. I want it to last. He placed a hand over hers, fingers warm. Then we'll make sure of it. 2 days later, the surveyor arrived on horseback, trailed by a mule laden with canvas and tools. He was younger than Jovie expected, polite but brisk. They fed him cornbread and coffee, and he spent 2 nights in the barn. By the time he left, he'd sketched out the perimeter of the Ellard homestead in careful lines, sealed with wax and signed. You're holding more than land, he said as he mounted to leave. You're holding a place that remembers who it belongs to. Jovie watched him ride off, the certificate stiff in her hands. It's ours now, she said. It's always been yours, Xalen replied. I just came to help you hold it. June brought wild irises to the pasture and a clutch of barn swallows beneath the eaves. The cabin smelled of straw and fresh soap. Jovie had taken to humming again while she moved through the rooms, and sometimes Xalen would join her, low and wordless. They fit. One afternoon, she found a cradle half finished beside the woodpile, curved sides carved from pine, smooth to the touch. She didn't say anything at first, just ran her fingers along the edge. You're sure? She asked that evening, voice quiet over the sound of the wind in the chimney. He didn't hesitate. I want a life that grows. She met his gaze. So do I. They were married in July, under a cottonwood near the creek. The preacher came up from Red Willow, and Mrs. Holcomb, despite her opinions, brought a basket of preserves and a quilt stitched in russet and cream. Jovie wore a dress she'd sewn herself, the blue thread stitched along the sleeves, neat and firm. Xalen wore his cleanest shirt and a carved bone button she'd given him as a token weeks before. They said their vows with hands clasped, no crowd, just the wind and the water and the land that had carried them both. When she looked into his eyes, she didn't see a drifter or a stranger. She saw the man who had stayed and made something steady out of what might have withered. That night, they sat on the porch in the hush between stars. He took her hand in his, thumb brushing across her knuckles. You've given me more than I ever asked for, he said. You gave me back the shape of my days, she answered. She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. The night air was cool, but not cold. Somewhere in the pasture, a lamb bleated once, then fell silent. Years passed soft as snowfall. The house grew by 2 rooms, one with wide windows that caught the morning sun, another that held a cradle carved from pine. Their daughter came in the second spring, dark-haired and serious-eyed. Jovie named her Clara, after her mother. Xalen built her a swing that hung from the cottonwood by the creek. The land held. The sheep multiplied. The garden stretched farther each year. The schoolhouse near the creek opened its doors, and Jovie taught letters to children who'd never held a book before. Xalen helped raise the barn roof when the town's feed store burned and took no pay for it. They buried the old mule beneath the ridge and planted wildflowers there. They kept bees. They danced, once, under a harvest moon with no music but the sound of crickets. They never spoke much about the hard years. They didn't need to. The quiet between them told it all. On their 10th anniversary, Xalen gave her a chair with carvings of barley and birds along the arms. She gave him a wool coat she'd stitched from her own flock, every seam strong as the day they met. They stood together still, on the land that had held them both, and watched their daughter run through the tall grass, arms stretched wide. They had known grief. They had known doubt. But they had chosen each other. And they had built something that would last.